Today on Toy Habits, we will be taking a look at one of the more dangerous members of the G.I. Joe team, Snake Eyes, and we'll be comparing him to the Snake Eyes from the G.I. Joe Classified series just to show you the scale of this figure. Hey everyone, welcome back to Toy Habits, and today we are taking a detailed look at the G.I. Joe Snake Eyes Origins Snake Eyes figure, his weapons and accessories, and we're also comparing him to his G.I. Joe Classified series figure for scale purposes only. And let's start off like we usually do by looking at the packaging, and Snake Eyes comes in the Snake Eyes G.I. Joe Origins packaging where you have the Snake Eyes logo here. You have the photo of Snake Eyes, which is appropriate because this is the Snake Eyes figure, and you have the action shot showing Snake Eyes' swinging gimmick, as well as you see his accessories here, and some are actually hidden behind these images here. And on the side of the box, you see the SE for Snake Eyes, and you have this really cool snake illustration and a very cool drawing of his initials there. And something I just noticed is that you have the Arashikage symbol here, and it is indented in the plastic. So if you look at it from the side, it kind of wraps around like the G.I. Joe Classified series boxes, but this is the plastic window display. You also have the symbols down here as well as another one up here. And looking at the back of the box, you see Snake Eyes holding his knives, and you do see an illustration where his knives can actually port into the nunchuck, so I can't actually wait to see that. You do have his action shot that is copied over from the front of the box, as well as another action shot showing his twisting gimmick. And let's first start out by looking at Snake Eyes' head sculpt, and where to start. There is so much detail in this head sculpt, so let's just start with the mask and his eye shield, and it just looks amazing with all of the sculpting detail that they have provided here. You have some detail on the side, and you do have some angled lines in the front, just giving it a lot of definition. And moving on to his actual mask, you have a mix of fits and finishes here and a lot of texturing. So if the camera can catch the light here, you can see the square detail that is above his eye shield, and it also carries around to the back of his head sculpt here. So let's just show you that. And I think it really looks amazing for a figure with this much detail in the basic assortment is actually astonishing to me. And moving down to his torso, you're actually going to see that square texturing that you see on his belt and across his chest pretty much everywhere on the figure. So I think it gives the figure a really interesting look because Snake Eyes is typically a black figure, and a lot of the texturing and detailing gets lost on a black figure, but not this one. And if we look around to the side, you can see some of the different finishes that they put on here. Some are glossy, some are matte, and you can see some of the texturing that they put in the middle of his chest and also around the sides where his abdomen is. And if you turn him around to the back, let me lift up his hand so you can kind of get a good view of all the texturing that you can see going around the side. And again, that texturing is also repeated back here where you have his straps joining, and I do love the way that they had sculpted the lower back here, as it just gives the figure a little bit of an angular look. Now, I did turn the contrast down on the camera a little bit so you can see that there's actually a gray strip running through his upper chest plate there, and I really think the grays on this figure really add something special and just delineate it from all of the previous Snake Eyes that were just a plain black figure. So I really love the way that they've done this here. And moving down to Snake Eyes' arms, his arms are actually asymmetrical, and it's only for the symbol on the side here. So I'm going to use both arms to show you the fits and finishes here, but let's zero in on that symbol, and you can see some cross-hatching detail there that runs right through the symbol, and it's also a gray piece which helps differentiate his bicep and the rest of his arm from each other. And you do see that square texturing on his forearm armor again, and also at the top of his glove. And if you look at his other arm, you can see the gray detail and some of the texturing underneath his arm. And I think it's just a great sculpt, and just all the fits and finishes that I've seen so far have the makings of a great figure. Ah, finally, a gratuitous crotch shot. But no, really, you can see the texturing here on his crotch, and you can also see the silver belt buckle detail there. And if you turn him around to the back, you can also see some armor that's on his bottom here. And I'm not really sure what to think about this. I wish this was actually placed on the small of his back instead of his butt, but there you have it. And moving down to the thighs, you do have a mix of fits and finishes and textures here, as well as paint apps. So if you take a look at the side of his thigh, you can see some of that square detail, but the way that they're oriented, it looks more like a diamond pattern. You also see some riveting detail here for his thigh armor. And if you look around to the other side, you can see that as well. And you can also see the gray paint app, which helps break up all the black that you see in his thighs. And moving down to the knee armor and the shin armor and the boot, you can actually see that all of these pieces are black. There are no grays down here, but what they've done is they've sculpting and a lot of texturing to break up all of the solid black pieces and just make the shin armor and knee armor really, really cool. Now, he's been given a huge chunky piece of knee armor here, and my only gripe with this knee armor is that it's attached to his boot. And what happens here is it reveals his joint when you bend him at the knee there. But I mean, all in all, this knee armor looks really cool, and I love that it's oversized and it just feeds into the boot. And if you look, and if this catches the light the right way, you can see the texturing that they put on the shin armor here. So I think it overall great job on the shin armor and the boots. And if you turn them around to the side, you can see some more sculpting detail in the back. And the last thing we'll look at before we move on to Snake Eyes' accessories are his articulation points. So Snake Eyes' head is on a ball joint, and he doesn't have a ton of up and down movement, but his head does move side to side pretty well. And his arms articulate at the shoulders and as well as the elbow joints here. And he doesn't have any wrist articulation. And if you move down to his legs, you'll see the knee articulation here, and he does swivel at the knee as well. So we'll get into his action poses and his action gimmicks after we review his accessories. Now, Snake Eyes does come with a lot of accessories, so let's start with his smaller knives. And he comes with 2 knives, so we're just going to take a look at them because they are exactly the same, but these knives have some detail on them, and it looks like a very old blade that was forged by many pieces of metal, and I think it looks really cool. And you do see some handle detail there where he places his hand. But this accessory looks very different from the box, and I will show you it after we review these accessories, because there is a difference between the prototype figure and the accessories and what's packaged in here. So let's take a look at that in a little bit. And next up, let's take a look at his nunchucks. And his nunchucks kind of mimic the 1988 version of Snake Eyes when he came with some silver nunchucks. And the nunchucks have some sculpting detail here and some texturing, and I think they look really cool. And if you look at the bottom of them, you can see the ports where the knives are supposed to plug in. But kind of a little bummer, the knives don't actually fit quite right in here. You kind of have to force them in, and if you take a look at this, the handles on the knives are actually too big for this port, so you kind of just have to shove them in there, which is fine. It actually doesn't damage the knife at all, but you can see that one plugs in over there and the other one just plugs into this port here, so it kind of gives a cool effect of some nunchuck knives that Snake Eyes can do a lot of damage with. And next up, let's take a look at his sheath. And his sheath is pretty basic, and it looks like it is carved of wood, or it might be made of leather or some material. It's a black piece, and it has some striations in it, and it does have a port that can plug into his back. And finally, let's take a look at his longer blade, and this sword is actually pretty cool. I love the black and gold detail that they've given it, as well as some of the texturing that they've given it on the handle. And let me bring in Storm Shadow's sword because I thought this was a carbon copy of Storm Shadow's sword, but it's actually a different sword, so I'm happy that they're not reusing parts here. And here you have Snake Eyes all geared up, and you get a 2-for-1 here because I'm going to show you his action gimmick as well as his sword and his sheath on his back. And I think it just looks really awesome when his sword is on his back. And if you take a look at his gimmick and twist him around, it's actually very cool because his nunchucks and his knives just fling wildly. So I just think it's a very cool effect. And with all the other figures in the line, if you do twist it too far, you hear that click and he will not return to center. So just recenter him and you can do some more damage with his action. And one thing to note that I alluded to earlier was the differences in his accessories and also his paint app now that I take a look at the back of the box. So let's take a look at these things closer. Now, in the product shot here, we see a handle on the blade and that is not present on the actual accessory. So you also see that there is some black etching in the blade up here, which is also not present, but the detail is still retained in both knives. And you'll also notice that in the prototype shot here, you see what looks like to be a removable bandolier or a strap, but the actual figure just has a molded piece on there which is not removable, and it's not as pronounced as the one in the packaging shot. And the next thing to note is just the difference in paint app. And in the prototype shot, he has a strip of gray running over the top of his head, and it actually wraps around to the side of his face mask. But in the real version, we have a black mask with no gray paint app, which I am super excited about because I think the gray would have detracted from the overall look of Snake Eyes. But I think this is just lazy product shots, and I wish that Hasbro would update their images to match the figure and the packaging. And I'm not going to do a full comparison with his G.I. Joe Classified Series version, but I just wanted to show you the difference in height and the difference in scale here. So the Origins Snake Eyes is a little bit shorter than the Classified version, but you can see that they are right close to each other. And if you were just to see this figure by itself, Snake Eyes would really look like it is a G.I. Joe Classified figure, but not as great as Storm Shadow, but it's getting there. I have to admit, when I first saw these figures on Hasbro's live stream, I was a hard pass, but when I saw them on the pegs, I decided to pick them up and get a closer look, and I'm very impressed with the amount of detail that they're pouring into these figures for the price point. What do you think of this figure? Let us know in the comments below, and remember to hit that subscribe button on your way out so you don't miss out on the latest reviews.